The wind howled across the endless desert dunes, carrying sand that stung every exposed inch of skin. Captain Lila Moreno's body ached from exhaustion. Her uniform, torn in multiple places, clung to her soaked back where she had crawled through rocky terrain for hours. Darkness enveloped everything, but the chill of the night was secondary to the weight pressing on her shoulders, the knowledge that her team had been scattered during the ambush, leaving her isolated and wounded. Lila's fingers trembled as she checked her radio one last time, the static hissing like whispers of doubt. Command had written her off. Intelligence reports labeled her missing. The rescue choppers wouldn't come. They thought she was gone. And yet, she refused to give in. Giving up was never in her nature. She glanced at the distant horizon, the faint glimmer of moonlight reflecting off a jagged dune. Somewhere beyond those shadows lay the extraction point, the only way to bring herself and any surviving teammates home. Every step was agony. A sharp pain radiated from her ankle, where a splinter of rock had pierced through her boot during the fall. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to keep moving. The desert floor beneath her boots shifted treacherously, threatening to topple her at every step. Each breath came in shallow gasps, as she reminded herself of why she was here. The men and women she had trained with, the mission that still needed completion, the promise that no one would be left behind. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had lost meaning in the oppressive darkness. The stars overhead were her only markers, glittering pinpricks against the vast void. Lila's mind raced with memories. The team's laughter before the operation, the tense briefing in the hot sun, the camaraderie that bound them together. And now, all that remained were echoes and silence. She crouched behind a ridge, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Her rifle rested heavy in her arms, ready at a moment's notice. Suddenly, a low rumble stirred the sand ahead. Lila froze, every nerve on edge. Was it the enemy? No. The sound had a different rhythm, mechanical, steady. Could it be a rescue chopper? She risked a glance at the sky, but all she could see were shadows dancing on the dunes. Her pulse quickened. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She reached for her flare gun, fumbling with numb fingers, and loaded the red flare. "Come on," she whispered to herself. "Show them I'm still here." With a deep breath, she fired. The flare shot upward, hissing as it cut through the night. Its crimson light illuminated the surrounding dunes, painting the desert in a fiery glow. Somewhere above, she hoped someone would see it. Her hope was fragile but unyielding. The minutes that followed felt like an eternity. Sand continued to bite at her exposed skin, wind whipped her hair into her eyes, and the darkness pressed against her from every angle. Then a distant whirring sound, faint at first, but unmistakable. A chopper. She could see its silhouette, cutting through the horizon, approaching slowly. Lila's lips curled into a grim, exhausted smile. They hadn't forgotten her. The helicopter's lights pierced the desert darkness, a beacon of salvation growing brighter with every passing second. Lila's flare had done its job, but her journey wasn't over. The sand beneath her feet was treacherous, each step a challenge, as she made her way toward the coordinates she knew from the briefing. Her body screamed in protest with every movement. Blood had soaked through her uniform where an old wound had reopened, and blisters coated her hands from gripping the rifle and flare gun. She pressed on, ignoring the throbbing in her ankle and the sharp stab of pain across her ribs. Lila had faced impossible odds before, but never had failure felt this close, so personal, so absolute. Through the crimson haze of the flare's glow, she could see the chopper now more clearly. Its blades cut arcs in the night sky, kicking up clouds of sand that swirled around her like a storm. She raised her hand in a steady wave, hoping the pilots would see her, guiding them through the barren wilderness. Suddenly, movement to her left caught her eye, shadows shifting among the dunes. Her instinct screamed. She crouched low, rifle at the ready, scanning for any signs of the enemy. The ambush might not have been over. Every sound in the desert seemed amplified. The whine of sand scraping over rocks, the soft whistle of wind, the distant rotor blades of her rescue. Then a voice crackled through her radio. "Lila? Lila Moreno, do you read? We see your signal." Her heart leapt. Relief flooded through her, mingled with exhaustion. "I read you," she replied, her voice hoarse. "Coordinates confirmed. I'm moving toward extraction." The chopper descended slowly, landing on the uneven terrain with precision, the pilot compensating for every ridge and dune. Lila gritted her teeth and pushed herself toward it, each step a battle against gravity and fatigue. She felt like her body was betraying her, but she ignored it. She couldn't afford to slow down, not now. As she neared the chopper, the ground beneath her seemed to tremble with the force of the rotors. The ramp lowered, and hands reached out to pull her up. Lila's fingers met the welcoming grip of her rescuers. She let herself be hauled inside, collapsing onto the floor of the aircraft, every muscle trembling. From inside the helicopter, she looked back at the desert stretching endlessly behind her. Her team had been scattered, the mission had been nearly lost, and yet she had survived. Her flare had been more than a signal. It had been a testament to her will, her courage, her refusal to be counted out. The chopper lifted off, climbing into the night sky, carrying her toward safety. For the first time in what felt like forever, Lila allowed herself to breathe deeply. The desert night had tested her limits, but she had endured. And though the journey wasn't over, one truth had become clear. They had written her off too soon. She wasn't done yet. The chopper soared over the vast desert, its engines screaming against the night air. Inside, Lila lay sprawled on the floor, muscles burning from the exertion of crawling and signaling. She could feel every bruise, every blister, every puncture in her body, but there was no time to rest. Intelligence reports had indicated a secondary ambush nearby, and the team had not yet regrouped. The desert was a labyrinth, hiding dangers beneath every dune, every shadow, every whispered gust of wind. Lila forced herself to her knees, gripping the edge of the seat. "Where's the nearest safe point?" she asked, voice raw. The pilot glanced back, a tense line cutting across his face. "About 5 clicks north. But there are reports of enemy patrols in the area. We'll have to fly low and fast to avoid detection." Low and fast meant danger, and Lila was no stranger to danger. She ran through every possible scenario in her head, analyzing risks, calculating the odds, her mind sharper than her body could handle. The flare had been her lifeline, but it had also marked her location for anyone watching. Enemy forces could be tracking her right now, waiting for the moment to strike. The desert below blurred as the helicopter banked, skimming over jagged ridges and deep valleys. Lila scanned for movement, for any sign of life or death. Shadows shifted in unnatural patterns, and she recognized the telltale glint of equipment. Enemy patrols, armored vehicles, perhaps even snipers lying in wait. Every muscle tensed. She had survived the first ordeal, but survival wasn't enough. She had a duty to her team, a mission to see through. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. The darkness warped time. The helicopter jostled over uneven terrain, and sand whipped through open vents, stinging Lila's face. Her fingers itched to check her rifle, to reload, to prepare for the inevitable fight. She had trained for this. Years of grueling exercises, simulations, live-fire drills. And now every lesson mattered. Every instinct mattered. A sudden flash caught her eye, something moving faster than it should. She froze, eyes narrowing. "Movement 2 o'clock," she shouted. The pilot adjusted course sharply, throwing her against the wall. "Visual confirmed," she said, heart racing. Small armored vehicles skidded over the dunes, Engines low, lights dimmed. The enemy had noticed the flare. Lila's mind raced. The rescue wasn't just about extraction. It was about evasion, about outthinking the enemy while her body screamed for relief. She grabbed a radio, issuing rapid updates. Chopper moving south. Expect patrol intercept at Sector 5. Adjusting altitude, low approach over ridge. Keep rotor wash tight, no sand clouds. Her voice was sharp, commanding. Exhaustion disappeared under necessity. The next hour was a blur of maneuvers. The helicopter dipped behind dunes, barely avoiding detection. Lila felt the wind tug at her, the sand sting her, the fear gnaw at her. But with every passing moment, she pushed herself further, refusing to surrender to fatigue. Her team's lives depended on her vigilance, and the desert would not claim her tonight. Finally, the outline of a makeshift safe zone appeared in the distance, a cluster of low, sandbagged bunkers illuminated faintly by internal lights. Relief surged through her, but she didn't relax. "Prepare for landing," she instructed, scanning for ambushes. Eyes sharp. This isn't over. The helicopter descended carefully, touching the sand with calculated precision. The landing zone was tense. Lila scrambled out of the chopper, every muscle quivering, eyes scanning for threats. The night was eerily quiet, broken only by the distant hum of engines and the crunch of sand beneath boots. Her team, though scattered, was already beginning to assemble, some limping, some nursing wounds, but alive. Seeing them brought a flicker of hope, even as fatigue threatened to overwhelm her. "Report status," she demanded, voice commanding despite exhaustion. One by one, her team stepped forward, detailing injuries, enemy sightings, and the condition of their vehicles. They had survived, but barely. Supplies were low, and morale teetered on the edge of despair. Lila absorbed it all, processing quickly. There was no time for sentimentality. The mission continued. She crouched over a rough map spread on the hood of a Jeep, tracing routes with her finger. "The extraction point is still 10 kilometers northeast," she said. "Enemy patrols are dense, but there's a ridge we can use for cover. We'll move in pairs, maintain radio silence until we're past Sector 8. Everyone clear?" The nods were slow but resolute. Lila could see the weariness in their eyes, the same weariness she felt. But she also saw determination. They trusted her. They would follow her lead through fire, sand, or blood. And she would not fail them. "Hydrate, check weapons, and eat if you can. We move at first light," she continued. "Tonight, rest your bodies. Tomorrow, we take back control of our mission." As her team settled, Lila found a moment alone. She sat against a bunker wall, drawing in the cool night air, feeling her pulse gradually slow. She thought about the flare, about the moment she had fired it into the night sky. That single action had changed everything. It had been her defiance, her message that she was not lost, not broken. It had been a spark of hope that carried them this far. But the desert night was unforgiving, and tomorrow would demand more. The enemy wouldn't wait, and every decision, every movement, every heartbeat mattered. She closed her eyes briefly, letting herself imagine safety for just a moment, then opened them again. There was work to do. The helicopter ascended above the desert, engines thrumming steadily. Inside, her team slumped against seats and walls, silence punctuated only by labored breathing and the distant hum of rotors. Lila, still standing, surveyed them. Each face told a story of struggle, fear, and endurance. They had made it through the inferno, but the mission was far from over. "Medical assessment," she ordered, voice calm but firm. Medics moved through the cabin, tending to burns, cuts, dehydration, and exhaustion. Lila's hands were steady as she assisted, even as pain radiated through her body. She had refused aid during the march, refusing to slow the team, but now she allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. The pilot spoke, voice over the intercom. "Base in sight. Prepare for landing and debrief." Lila's team exchanged glances. Relief was tempered with lingering tension. Their ordeal wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Surviving ambushes, exhaustion, and desert heat had taken a toll that would last longer than any visible wound. As the helicopter touched down, Lila led her team out, ensuring everyone disembarked safely. The base was a flurry of activity. Medics, logistics officers, and commanding officers all converged to assess the situation. Lila briefed the higher-ups, detailing enemy movements, the team's condition, and the strategies that had enabled their survival. Her leadership had been flawless under pressure, and it was recognized immediately. But Lila's mind was already forward-focused. Tomorrow's missions awaited. Intelligence needed to be gathered, reinforcements planned, and the enemy kept off balance. She had survived the desert, but the war was ongoing. As night fell, she sat alone briefly, looking out over the base, thinking about the flare she had fired hours ago. That single act had been a beacon, not just to the helicopter, but to her team, proving that even when written off, one person's determination could change the outcome. She allowed herself one deep breath, then rose. Rest would come later. The mission never ended, and neither would her vigilance. The first light of dawn barely touched the horizon when Lila roused her team. Fatigue weighed heavily on them, muscles stiff and minds clouded, but there was no room for weakness. The desert demanded discipline. Survival demanded movement. Move out. Lila commanded, voice cutting through the morning chill. Her team scrambled into formation, checking weapons, ammunition, and radio gear. Sand crunched beneath their boots as they advanced, each step measured, calculated. They weren't just crossing a desert. They were navigating a battlefield littered with invisible threats, with enemy patrols watching, waiting, calculating. Lila led, scanning constantly. The desert, vast and open, seemed deceptively empty. Shadows could hide snipers, and distant movements could signal ambushes. She remembered her training. Move quietly. Use terrain to your advantage. Anticipate threats before they become immediate. Every dune, every ridge, every rock was a potential advantage or a trap. Hours into the march, the sun rose fully, baking the desert sand. Heat radiated from the ground, and the team struggled against dehydration, exhaustion, and the relentless sun. Lila, feeling the burn of every blister and cut, ignored her own pain. She had fired that flare the previous night, declaring her presence to the rescue chopper. But she had also committed to leading her team through fire, sand, and enemy lines. A sudden crackle of movement made her freeze. She signaled her team down, lowering her rifle slowly. Across a distant ridge, enemy scouts appeared, their shadows stretching long and threatening in the morning light. They were moving toward the team, likely drawn by the same flare that had signaled hope. 2 squads advancing fast, she whispered into the radio. Prepare to engage, suppress, and flank. Keep low. Use cover. Move as one. Lila's heart raced, not with fear, but with focus. Every mission she had survived had taught her one thing. Hesitation was fatal. She crouched, eyes scanning, and fired the first controlled shots, signaling her team to unleash coordinated fire. Bullets kicked up sand around them, the air thick with smoke and dust. Time stretched as the firefight raged. Lila moved fluidly, covering her team, shifting positions, and calling out targets. Each movement was precise, instinctive, lethal. The enemy pushed back, surprised at the resilience of a squad that seemed barely awake, barely fed, barely human, but entirely determined. Minutes felt like hours. Sweat stung Lila's eyes, her shoulder burned from her rifle's weight, and her legs screamed under the strain, but she did not falter. Slowly, methodically, the enemy was forced to retreat behind a distant ridge. The team exhaled, but there was no celebration. Only the relentless awareness that this was just one battle of many. Keep moving, she ordered, voice steady. Extraction point is still 5 clicks ahead. No stopping. No lagging. The desert seemed endless, the horizon a cruel tease. Heat shimmered off the sand, creating illusions of obstacles, paths, and enemy forces. But Lila focused, step after step, guiding her team with the precision of a machine tempered by human instinct. They moved as one entity, a single pulse of will against the relentless desert and enemy. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion had turned to near collapse for some of the team, but Lila refused breaks longer than necessary. Every glance over her shoulder reminded her of the stakes. The rescue helicopter was their only chance, but the enemy would not let them pass unchallenged. Finally, the extraction site appeared, a small patch of sand marked by faint smoke from a signal flare. Relief surged momentarily, but Lila forced herself to ignore it. "Position yourselves," she ordered. "Secure the perimeter. Check your weapons. Prepare for landing." The chopper appeared on the horizon, a small growing larger with each heartbeat. The team moved with practiced urgency, forming defensive positions around the landing area. Enemy scouts, anticipating their arrival, appeared on distant dunes, but Lila's team was ready. Bullets sang through the air as Lila coordinated suppressive fire. The helicopter descended carefully, engines kicking up sand in blinding waves. In that moment, Lila felt the weight of every wound, every blister, every sleepless night, and every risk she had taken. Yet she remained standing, a sentinel, ensuring every team member reached safety. Finally, one by one, her team was pulled aboard. Exhausted, battered, but alive. Lila was the last to board, scanning the horizon one last time. The desert, with all its perils, seemed to bow to her perseverance. She boarded the helicopter, and as it lifted into the sky, she allowed herself a brief, fleeting smile. Survival was never just a matter of luck. It was earned, step by step, decision by decision. The night settled over the desert like a velvet shroud, cool winds cutting through the exhaustion of the day. Lila's team had been given a brief window of rest, but she knew they could not linger. The enemy still roamed the region, and the intelligence suggested a hidden arms depot nearby that, if not neutralized, would result in countless civilian casualties. "Listen up," Lila addressed her team, her voice quiet but commanding. "We've survived ambushes, dehydration, and heat exhaustion. But this isn't over. Tonight, we finish what we started." Her team nodded, eyes reflecting both fatigue and determination. They had walked through fire before, but this mission required more than survival. It required precision, courage, and absolute trust in one another. The plan was straightforward but deadly. Infiltrate the depot under the cover of darkness, neutralize the guards silently, and destroy the weapon stockpiles before extraction. The path was treacherous. Landmines, patrols, and snipers could turn a single misstep into disaster. They moved silently, sand crunching softly beneath boots. Lila led from the front, scanning constantly, aware that one wrong movement could alert the enemy. Hours of desert navigation had sharpened her instincts. She could sense danger in the smallest shift of shadow, in the faintest echo. The depot came into view, a sprawling compound surrounded by high fences and floodlights. Lila signaled her team to halt. They crouched in the dunes, observing guard rotations, the placement of cameras, and the patterns of searchlights. She memorized every detail, planning each movement. "Split into 2 teams," she whispered. "Alpha takes the east entrance. Bravo covers the west. Silence, precision, and speed." Her team moved like ghosts. Every step was calculated, every breath controlled. The first sentry fell silently to a suppressed shot. Cameras were disabled, and the fencing bypassed with wire cutters that glinted in the dim moonlight. Inside the depot, the smell of metal, oil, and gunpowder was thick. Lila's eyes darted from crate to crate, every corner a potential threat. They moved in tandem, neutralizing guards without raising alarms, clearing rooms with meticulous care. Suddenly, a faint click echoed from the far end. A guard had spotted them. Without hesitation, Lila leaped into action, covering her team as a quick firefight erupted. Bullets ricocheted, and the team adapted instantly, using cover, coordinating suppressive fire, and advancing systematically. Lila's leadership shone. She anticipated enemy movements before they occurred, ensuring her team remained unscathed. Minutes stretched, but eventually, the depot was secured. Lila moved to the central storage, placing explosives on key weapon caches. The countdown timer ticked away, the faint red digits reflecting in her determined eyes. She turned to her team. Clear the area. Move fast. Extraction was imminent, but the enemy had been alerted. Reinforcements approached from the north and south. Lila's team braced for a confrontation. Bullets cut through the night, sparks flying as they returned fire while maintaining cover. Her heart pounded, but her focus never wavered. The extraction helicopter appeared on the horizon, searchlight scanning for the team. Lila covered the rear, ensuring every teammate reached the perimeter safely. She was the last to move, sprinting under fire, and jumped aboard as the helicopter lifted off. Below, the depot erupted in controlled explosions, flames licking the sky. Mission accomplished. Her team had survived, weapons destroyed, enemies neutralized. But the cost of every victory lingered in their bodies, minds, and hearts. As the helicopter rose higher, Lila looked down, feeling a mixture of triumph and exhaustion. They had walked through fire, battled through fatigue, and emerged victorious. And yet, she knew that each mission left a mark, a permanent reminder that heroism demanded sacrifice. The sun had barely risen over the base when the helicopter touched down. Exhausted soldiers spilled onto the tarmac, greeted by medics and commanding officers. Relief, exhaustion, and pride intermingled in the air. Lila's team moved as one, battered but alive. She watched them, noting each injury, each sign of strain, yet also each spark of resilience that had carried them through the desert, the firefights, and the depot infiltration. A commanding officer approached. "Lieutenant Lila, the operation exceeded expectations. Your leadership, precision, and courage saved lives tonight." Lila nodded, weary. It was a team effort. Every single member contributed. No one left behind. That's how we survive. Medics guided her team into the infirmary for treatment, and Lila finally allowed herself to sit. Pain, exhaustion, and emotion crashed over her in waves. Her body ached. Her mind replayed every decision, every risk taken. She remembered the flare she had fired days ago, signaling hope in a barren desert, and how that one act had set everything into motion. Outside, the base hummed with activity, soldiers preparing for the next mission, vehicles moving in endless choreography. But Lila sat quietly, reflecting on what it took to lead, to survive, and to protect. The desert, the enemy, the missions, they tested her at every turn, and she had endured. Her team returned one by one, exchanging nods and quiet words. Mutual respect had deepened into unspoken bonds, forged in fire, sand, and bullets. Lila felt a rare smile tug at her lips. They had survived together. Later, in the quiet of her quarters, Lila looked at a photograph of her fallen comrades from previous missions. The weight of every life lost, every sacrifice made, and every mission completed pressed upon her. She touched the photo gently. "I carry you with me," she whispered. The flare, the desert, the firefights, they were over, but the lessons remained. Courage, strategy, endurance, and compassion, the qualities that defined her, and those who served beside her. She had been written off, underestimated, dismissed, but she had survived, led, and triumphed. And in that moment, Lila understood fully. Heroism wasn't about being remembered in glory. It was about being willing to stand when others falter, to fight when others flee, and to survive when all seems lost. The sun climbed higher, casting light on a base that would soon bustle with life again. Lila stood, ready to lead once more, carrying not just her team, but every lesson, every sacrifice, every flame of hope that had guided them through darkness. Her story was not finished. It was only another beginning.